Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today, the message is brought to us by Mauricio Quintero. Thank you, Mauricio. It's an excellent message. And I changed it in the English a little bit, the title, What Drives the Heart? In chapter 6 to 8 of Micah, the prophet asks a profound question. With what shall I appear before the Lord and bow down before the Most High God? The question is, as a mere mortal, what can I offer the Eternal? Doesn't the verse in Tehillim, Psalms 146, verse 6, say about the Eternal, who made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything in them? So if the Eternal created everything visible, physical, and material, what can we possibly give him? Why should we give? And above all, to whom do we give? This portion Terumah, which means offering or gifting, occurs after the error or the sin of the golden calf. But here it is written as a previous event. It's full of symbolism and the instruction of the Eternal to have a physical habitation in this material world where he would dwell among the people. They had expressed their desire to do and obey his words. In Hebrew, the word give is natan, nun, tav, nun sofit. And interestingly, this word can be read either from left to right or right to left, signifying that when it comes to giving, no matter from what direction, it always counts. It's noteworthy that they would be using 15 materials to build the Mishkan. Now, in Gematria, 15 is Yud Hey, 10 plus 5. Every number in Hebrew, every letter is a number. So 10 plus 5, which also directs us or leads us to God, Yah, God. Although it seems to focus on the material items, it's more about the relationship being built between God and his people for a specific purpose. The parasha begins with Daber el bnei Israel vayikluli truma me'et kol ish asher yidvenu lebo takhu el trumati. Speak to the children of Israel so that they set aside an offering for me. From every man whose heart urges him to do so, you will take an offering for me. Here we find the answer to those three previous questions. What? Why? And to whom do we give? The central theme is from the first commandment, which says, I am the Eternal, the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. This implies that we are now people to whom the Eternal has given the greatest gift of all, Bechira Chofshit, free will. We are no longer to be slaves. Our Rabbi, Rabbi, often repeated this phrase, free will. It's the ability to decide. It's the greatest gift that the Eternal has given to man, and possibly not the most valued. Unlike the golden calf, which was imposed and in which the people were obliged, here the Eternal wants us to exercise this greatest gift, our right to decide. He doesn't impose upon us. He gives us free choice. Shemot 32:2 says, And Aaron said to them, Take off the rings that are in the ears of your wives and your sons and your daughters and bring them to me. This implies that they had no choice but to bring something, almost as if they were assaulted. Do we see any option of choice in the verbs take off or bring them to me? Apparently not. When the people saw that Moshe was not coming down from the mountain, I imagine they almost lynched Aaron and took away his free will when they told him, Get up and make gods for us to go before us. Was there any option of choice with the verbs get up and make? Of course, today it's easy for us to say that Aaron should have stood up and said no, which would probably have made him a martyr. Or when Aaron requested the rings, someone could have stood up and said, No, I will not take off my family's earrings. Or even have told Aaron, No, I will not bring them to you or take them to you. For me, it's quite clear that fear overtook their minds, making them slaves of their thoughts, which led them to commit such a mistake. That is such an important thing. For me, I'll repeat it. For me, it's quite clear that fear overtook their minds, making them slaves of their thoughts. Remember, we have free choice. Parashat Terumah occurs after the golden calf incident. And the beautiful thing about this is that God forgave that generation. He first covered their error by elevating them for their generosity, but then he showed their mistake to all the world. It's like speaking well of someone who made mistakes in his past. The most important thing in his life is not what he had done wrong, but who he is today, especially when he does teshuvah, which means return to God. God is so wonderful in giving us an antidote to idolatry, terumah. So God plans to dwell among everyone, but based on what? On our free choice. God plans to dwell among everyone based on our free choice. The calf was born out of slavery, and the relationship with the Eternal out of our desire to be with him. How do we fulfill it? In the verb separate. Separate from me, for me, from everyone who has the willingness to do so. The calf made from their golden earrings had a high value that not everyone could afford. But we also read that God gave them materials of various values, which they had already received from the Egyptians as compensation for their slavery, so that no one would be excluded. Shemot 12, Exodus 12, verses 35 to 36 says, Then following the instructions that Moses had given, they asked the Egyptians to give them objects of gold and silver, and also clothing. The Lord made the Egyptians look favorably on the Israelites, so they gave them everything they asked for. From this, we learn that we can never say to the Eternal, You haven't given me anything. From the moment we received his breath of life, we at least have this breath within us. In the same way, unlike other beliefs, other faiths, other religions that ask for offerings or tithes for the future, we can see that the Eternal does not ask for anything that he has not already provided for us. Otherwise, what kind of God would he be? An unjust one. Therefore, if God asks us for something, it is because he has already given it to us. Exercising our will and being aware that nothing is ours, but that everything comes from the heavens, leads us to the next point: generosity. Generosity is not only for the present, but also for the future. According to our sages, Yaakov was shown the end of time. He had acacia trees planted 210 years before that moment. In that sense, we will not see the fruit of our generosity in our day, but our children will enjoy it. This leads me to the idea that we should not give based on others, such as, if so-and-so gives, then I'll give. Or if so-and-so gave 10, then I'll give $10. If he gives $5, I'll give $5. Our generosity must stem from our freedom of choice, from our heart to give, not based upon what society does or does not do, expecting something in return, or only if it's the ideal situation for giving. Giving must be free, like in the case of Yaakov, where he didn't know if his acacia forest would be used in the future by his descendants. And I noticed, by the way, when we were reading the portion, that the acacia was used to build the Mishkan. So here, if Yaakov did indeed plant these trees, they would have been used to build a Mishkan in the desert. To whom do we give? To God. If that's how we think, then God would laugh at us. We give for us, for our well-being, for our community. We give with generosity through freedom of decision. The Shekhinah manifests itself. He says in 25:8, "V'yasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham." That beautiful song that we sing. "And make me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them." What joy! He doesn't say, "I will dwell in the Mishkan." I will dwell among them. This verse begins in the singular form, but ends in the plural. The sanctuary, therefore, was not God's dwelling place. Shlomo, King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, said, "But is it possible, my God, for you to dwell on the earth? If the heavens, no matter how high, cannot contain you, how much less this temple that I have built?" The Mishkan is not a container for the eternal. David said in Psalm 24:1, "The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness of it, the world and those who dwell in it." So the Mishkan was not for the eternal. It was for us to focus our attention upon Him, so that we dwell focused on Him together in this Mishkan, and that He would manifest Himself among us, as so many of us can attest to. When each of us gives, which is singular, for the Mishkan, then the Eternal manifests Himself in the community. There's a very profound Hebrew phrase which says, Kol Israel Averim Ze LaZe. All Israel is responsible for one another. That's why we Jews believe that we're all responsible for each other. This is not the time to ask ourselves rhetorical questions like Cain did. Am I responsible for my brother? Am I my brother's keeper? We must act freely, with generosity, which we call tzedakah, giving, to seek the common good. It would be a mistake for us to think that this is limited to economic issues. We read in the next books of the Torah that everyone contributed to build Mishkan. Everyone contributed. Some gave money, others brought materials, others contributed with their intelligence, their intellect, others with their artistic abilities. Some were carpenters, some were builders, etc. It gave them a purpose. They were being useful to build something that would elevate them. It's through service to the eternal that we rise. The altar where the offerings were burnt had an incline that made them elevated. In other words, the act of giving elevates us and makes us grow. My prayer on this Shabbat is that we are free to enjoy the gift of choice, that we are generous and not poor in our minds as we give and contribute to others, that the presence of the eternal resides among us so that we can live full and rich lives. Shabbat Shalom.